See me, C3 at Wheels Through Time today. Rode the motorcycle with group buddies of mine. Beautiful fall day. Get some footage of some really cool bikes inside here in a little bit. Show you some of the bikes that we came on today. That'll be pretty cool over here. This part of the group, we had to split up on the parking area. We got every different kind of bike you can think of. Big old gold wing trike. We got Harleys. We got all different kinds of bikes over here.
We're known for it. People come and find us at the race. I downloaded your mobile app. Yeah, man.
Let's get some of the stuff inside too.
gentleman purchases a corner plot and he employs 2 Polish plumbers to knock the building down. So the Polish plumbers are there and they're slaving away and they're used to hearing the crack of the hammer hitting the brick, the thud as it lands into the room next door or out into the courtyard, when all of a sudden one day the crack of the hammer hitting the brick turned into a loud resounding ting when it hit something made of metal. A second brick, a third brick, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, maybe 8 bricks would land on something made of metal, and of course they would decide to stop what they're doing. Now, the Polish plumbers get a set of step ladders, shimmying up the step ladders. They're not looking into the room next door, but looking down into a secret cavity they had no idea was there. In that cavity was something covered up in a dust chute, this pipe. At this stage it was in this original condition. Tyres completely rotten, delaminated. Couldn't see much of the paint because of the dust and the grime, and more important, dirty old tar over everything. Now, the Polish plumbers have been in Chicago long enough to realise that this was an old gangster's trick, so they had no fear. They pulled the wall down, they throw back the dust sheet, and that's when they suddenly realised they've got a motorbike they've never heard of. It must have some value. So at lunchtime, they pushed the bike to the expert in motorcycling in North Paulina Street. This would be Turillo and Albert Tacci. Turillo and Albert, the local Suzuki dealers, they were actually a father and son team. Not only were they experts, but collectors of rare American motorbikes. But with all their expertise, they'd never heard of a bike called a Trail, and more important, never seen an engine quite like this. So Turillo and Albert suspect that they've got a missing link. A link between the motor bicycle with pedals, motorbike with a kickstart. So they go into negotiation, eventually swapping a second-hand Suzuki for this bike. Now Turillo and Albert have got no idea what they got, so they push the bike into the back workshop. That is where they carefully sponge off all the dirt and grime, revealing this original paint. They would order and fit new tyres. While they're waiting for the tyres to be delivered, they put oil in the engine, oil in the gearbox, and get the engine and gearbox running smoothly. So within a short period of time, as soon as the tyres are fitted to the bike, they put fuel in the petrol tank, and if you've got compression, spark and fuel, you've basically got yourself a running motorbike. Turillo and Albert would take it to shows. He would ride it on the roads of Chicago and would eventually sell it in the late 1970s to a gentleman called Bud Ekins. Now, I'm pretty sure everyone knows who Bud Ekins is, yes? No. And yet it's inspired you to do some crazy things. This is where your homework starts, young man. Bud Ekins is one of the world's top motocross, enduro and desert racers. For America, the hardest race ever to win was the International 6-day trial. Over mountains, desert, whatever it is, for 6 days you have to keep that motorbike running and you have to be on time. If you're late, you lose points. You're broken down. If you're early, you've been speeding, you lose points. If your bike is too loud, you lose points. If your light's not working, you lose points. Bud Ekins for America would enter and win the International 6-day trial gold medallion for 5 years. That's truly amazing. But that's not why he's famous. He was a Triumph dealer from California. His close personal friend, his riding companion, and probably his best customer was a gentleman called Steve McQueen. Have you heard of him? Right. In 1963, Steve McQueen is invited to make a film called The Great Escape. This is where your homework starts. Great Escape. There's a pen. Write it on your hand. Use your own. Right. So, of course, Steve McQueen was allowed to take certain liberties on this true story. And what happened was, it's the truth, 76 prisoners escaped, 75 would be recaptured, and what would happen is Hitler was so furious, he ordered the execution or the murder of 50 of them. However, in that true story, you will not see Captain Shields, Steve McQueen, taking liberties to have that motorcycle chase. He wanted to show his prowess, and so he would invite his good friend Bud over to Germany. So what happens is Captain Shields escapes, he puts the grotted wire across the track. The German dispatch rider, Bud Ekins, on that Triumph motorbike, would skid around the corner, come a cropper. Captain Shields picks the bike up, comes up over the bank, and of course at that stage he's in a German uniform. He is now being chased across Germany. Now, of course, he's being chased by Steve McQueen in a German uniform, riding yet another Tron. And what happens is the chase would culminate with that famous jump over the barbed wire fence where Bud Ekins jumps for his good friend Steve McQueen. Now, it wasn't that Steve McQueen couldn't do the jump, it was that Steve McQueen couldn't get insured to do the jump. For the self-same reason, in the chase scene in Bullet, right, Bullet down. You don't have to, I'll give you a list of them. Again, you're going to see that green Mustang was primarily being driven again by Bud Ekins. Steve McQueen, even Steve McQueen couldn't get insured to go at neck break speeds past parked cars in San Francisco, but more important, lose 17 hubcaps in one car chase. You know, you have a stunt man. Now, of course, Bud was never credited with them roles. However, in the late 1970s in Chicago, he would be credited for doing the stunts in a film called The Blues Brothers. 150 Illinois police cars were written off in that chase. They were Illinois police cars. 150. The studios had to pay for them. And of course, what would happen is Bud was up in Chicago, but we didn't know the connection between Bud Ekins and Turillo and Albert until probably about a year, 18 months ago. What happens is a gentleman came into the museum, and just like yourselves, they came from Chicago. Oh no, you've got to come and see this bike. But I'm here to look for my uncle's bike. And of course, no, we had just found this map. And of course, what would happen is Al Payne came around the corner, and if you want to see the video, that's another name to put on your hand. Al Payne actually did an interview because Al Payne would turn around and say, no, this is the bike I'm looking for. And I said, could you explain? Uncle Turillo has recently passed away, and we've just come from the funeral, and out of respect, I wanted to see his bike. So we sat Al Payne down and we had a lovely chat, and of course what would happen is there was a few twists and turns. One, we definitely know it was Polish plumbers. We also know for a fact it was a corner plot of North Carolina and Pierce. And I said, what was the connection between Bud Ekins and Turillo and Albert? And the answer was just so simple. It had been Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen would be born into this world to have a terrible childhood. At the age of 6 months, his father would leave home. His mother had her problems. So Terence, Steve McQueen, would end up going to his grandparents. He was brought up in Missouri, and when his mother straightens her life out, remarries, Terence, or Steve McQueen, would go over to San Francisco or California. What you're going to see then is he's at loggerheads with his stepfather. He would be so bad that he would end up in the Californian Boys Institute, which Steve McQueen sponsored all his life and after his death. On leaving the Californian Boys Institute, he joins the Merchant Marines, eventually joining the Marine Corps. He would have a checkered career, but once he realised the Marine Code was the best code, that is where he buckled down and became a good soldier. On leaving the Marine Corps, he was told by taking up acting, he would meet beautiful ladies. And so what would happen is he used the GI Bill to take up acting. He would get a lucky break in a series called Wanted Dead or Alive, and he would become ferociously wealthy and very, very famous. He would then start earning fortunes and money, so he could now chase the love of fast cars, fast motorbikes, and of course fast aeroplanes. What would happen is when he used to go to these shows, he would meet Turillo and Albert, and Steve McQueen had a fondship of Albert, Turillo's father. He was like a father figure to him. So what happens is he would hear that the Suzuki dealership was closing, and Turillo and Albert were selling off some of the collection of the motorbikes. Steve McQueen had the money to stump up to buy all the Indian side of their collection. But this left a number of other motorbikes. So while he was up there, Steve McQueen would bring his stuntman Bud Ekins to come down, and they would have supper. Now Bud Ekins had been in this job for over 30 years. He would notice something very unusual about the bike. On that day, he buys 3 motorbikes, this being one of them. Taking it down to his Triumph dealership, he would go through it with a fine-tooth comb. He would then call his experts, who would go through it with a fine-tooth comb. Dale had to go one stage further, and in this catalogue you will see a series of photographs because all of them will witness every single major part of this motorcycle, with the exception of 5 individual parts. Everything else on this motorbike had been homemade. Now, the 5 parts of this motorbike which have been purchased by Mr. Trout, being the seat, the carburettor, the magneto and the 2 wheel rims. So using them 5 parts, the experts would give this bike a year of manufacture of 1916, based on them 5 parts. So in 1916 or thereabouts, Mr. Trout has invented possibly one of the earliest 80 cubic inch 3-speed transmission kickstart operated motorbikes, not just in the whole of America, we're talking the whole of the world. But more important, this was 21 years ahead of Harley Davidson's 80 cubic inch, light years ahead of Indian. The American male and female psyche of bigger, better, faster. Had this actually gone on sale in 1916, instead of being holed up in the wall, it probably would have sold like hotcakes, putting Harley and Indian out of business during the Depression. Like I say, Google this bike, I will guarantee it will come up as the world's rarest motorbike. Unfortunately not today, because the kickstart mechanism has, the teeth has just started to wear too much. We don't want this to get ruined, because of course we get young people, and when they get married and have children, we want their children to still be able to see this bike. Hopefully this winter we can take the bike off show, get it all machined and put it all back together again. And next year, pretty much I'll guarantee, on our anniversary, the 2nd of July, you'll see this bike home.
Please do it.
Please do. And also, if you go outside, there's a telly underneath the counter. You can actually see Matt riding the wheels of the one. Any other questions?
Very
Pardon me?